Well, right now, plenty of economists forecast that at some stage, Australia's households and businesses must buckle under the weight of those cost increases and the interest rate rises. Insolvencies, you can see, are rising right now. And one example is Sarah Lee, the 52-year-old frozen dessert maker that this week went into administration. The hope is it can be sold and save at least a few of those jobs. But its struggle says everything about rising costs and consumers cutting back, perhaps even changing tastes. There's another truth here. The Reserve Bank has one interest rate for the whole country, but the picture in different states is so different. Even different cities can be mixed. Independent economist Warren Hogan has been working on that picture of the states and their differing fortunes. Hogan, a consultant for the small business lender Judo Bank, joins me now. Warren, we normally get a quick chat with each other. Let's just break this down a little bit, shall we? The states quite clearly have got quite different sort of fundamentals driving their economies right now. And I know you've been working on this, but while the overall economy, you get a sense, is going to at some stage slow, that's not going to be the same for every city, is it?
Yeah, well, there's always going to be a divergence of performance. And on top of that, the pandemic's really thrown a lot into the mix, particularly around people flows, population. So I think the standout state in terms of changing economy is South Australia. After 20 years of really struggling, poor economic performance, low population growth, loss of manufacturing, they've seen a real rebound in population. They've seen a big pickup in business investment. I call it the economic renaissance. Let's see if they can fulfil that potential. Then at the other end of the scale, Tasmania, also suffering a little bit under loss of population. They had a population boom ahead of the pandemic,
yes,
coming off now. So there are different stories at play. The universal thing, though, is the consumer belt tightening is happening across the country in response to that single interest rate. And also there is a countrywide construction boom going on.
Okay, I want to get you to that because the real issue here is that if you don't get a slowing of the economy, if you still get these inflationary pressures, then the Reserve Bank will have no choice but to raise interest rates, which will actually hit consumers even harder again. Companies like Sarah Lee we saw, small businesses are going to be affected because at some point, and this is what your survey shows, small businesses can't raise their prices fast enough. They don't have the power, the pricing power that bigger businesses have.
Yeah, well, eventually all business will be caught up in it. So we're moving to the next phase of the slowdown. It's been led by softer consumer spending, but now we're picking up evidence that these elevated cost pressures, which are not going away right up until the latest data in October, that smaller, medium enterprises are struggling to pass those on as the economy slows. And I think eventually that'll be the same for larger businesses too. So what you're seeing is the cost pressures aren't just straight away ending up in inflation, as they have been for the last 18 months. They're now some inflation, which the Reserve Bank will be worried about, but also impacting margins and profitability, which of course then affects business investment, business hiring.
Okay, so let's go around the states because it's different. And again, this will pick up some of the picture of different industries as well. Where do you want to start? Which state do you want to start in?
Well, New South Wales, biggest state, really reflects the national story in so many ways. And, you know, the consumer is tightening its belt, but there is an infrastructure boom going on here, led through the Western Sydney, but it is statewide. And we are seeing not just infrastructure, we're seeing commercial construction. And I think the big question for New South Wales is, with all this construction going on now and over the next few years, can we build enough houses for this big lift in population growth? We've had more migration into New South Wales in the 12 months to...
Look at this, that infrastructure pipeline goes through the roof, right? All the way out.
Yep.
But the question there is, that in itself is inflationary. And we've seen that in the construction industry, which is why so many businesses in the construction and building area have collapsed over the past 12 to 18 months.
It's put huge pressure on the industry. It is inflationary, but I think the industry is starting to sort itself out. But the sheer scale of the projects coming down the pipe across the country, across the eastern seaboard anyway, do we have the capacity? Do we have the labour to do this? Infrastructure Australia thinks we're already 200,000 workers short for the potential pipeline of infrastructure. So, while we're worried about the economy, there's actually this strong underpinning, and New South Wales is leading the way there. I'm pretty comfortable that once we get through this slowdown, New South Wales is going to have a good 3 to 5 years ahead.
So the next one is Victoria. Now, Victoria clearly also has a big infrastructure and housing pipeline that's coming down the track with population rising. But then against that, there's that massive growth in state debt and question marks about whether some of its infrastructure projects will and should go ahead.
Yeah, putting the efficacy of the infrastructure aside, it is happening. It's as big an infrastructure build as anything going on in New South Wales. But the government has put a lot of new taxes into that economy, and that is starting to generate concern. The cancelling of the Commonwealth Games, another curveball for investors thinking about, is this government for real?
You say there the Premier's resignation might build confidence. Why would that build confidence necessarily? People love him down there.
Well, they love him down there, but does business love him with the payroll taxes? And one thing we do know is that property investors are not really all that interested in Victoria.
Talked to plenty of those as well. All right, let's next go to Queensland. And the reason for that is because Queensland traditionally has been the state with the fastest growing population. And that really underpins its economy. And then on top of that, you've got the added attraction of the Olympics and all the building that needs to come for the Olympic Games.
Yeah, so Queensland's infrastructure boom is just getting started. Yeah, and this is 4 hospitals, 12 billion of roads projects, and the pre-Olympic infrastructure bill that's going to be quite phenomenal.
Plus, it's got resources.
Well, it's got resources, although, interestingly, Queensland's mining sector, mining investment, has not materially picked up. It has in WA. But the big issue for Queensland, as you said, is are they going to have the workers to fulfil this potential?
But look at this rebound in population growth. That underpins housing, that underpins a whole bunch of stuff if you've got the population there.
That's right. And look, I think the 30 years to 2008, the pre-GFC, that was the high growth period. Now we've seen Queensland come back to the national average, but I think in the next 10 years, they need that strong population growth to build the infrastructure to fulfil the promise.
OK, let's go to South Australia, which you say is the standout state right now. Peter Malinauskas, the state premier, clearly has injected significant confidence into that state. So just some of the key issues here, do you think?
Well, the population dynamics fundamentally changed. They were losing people every year in the 20 years prior to the pandemic. Now they're actually getting people moving back. But it's more than that. Business is investing. There's a business investment boom happening. That's genuine capacity, new industry, probably some manufacturing, some defence, hard to know exactly. But there's something very real happening in the South Australian economy. And of course, Malinauskas has come in, seems to have been able to get the support of the business community at the right time. But the interesting thing, South Australia is probably the one state that doesn't have a big infrastructure build. A lot of it's in the private sector. I think the government's got to really get behind what's happening now and give it momentum if it's to, again, fulfil this renaissance.
Warren Hogan, always good to chat to you here on the program. Many thanks. Good to have a bit more time with you today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross.